Part 2 of Golovanov stream number 27. All right, next question. Why United States are not using illegal immigrants as the workforce for defense companies? You do not need to struggle with them. You might control them and use them as a resource, give them insurance bonuses and a way to legitimize themselves. Because if United States does not start a proper production of military munitions, they will likely not win the war with China if that happens. Well, first of all, migrants do not want to work at large. There are some people who do, but en masse, a lot of them coming there for special subsidies and just better life supported by government. Going the pathway to working, even as a technician on these factories, is a long one. You need to study, you need to have certain equipment, certain skills of how to deal with it. Plus, it's also somewhat a secretive production, so you need to be cleared for security and all other things. So it's not so simple, especially in the area of industrial military complex. Second, they did try to build that semiconductor factory, and it's not exactly working. Like, it's working, doing some stuff, but not enough, not as it was planned. They tried with Taiwanese, they tried with some Mexicans, but the factory is barely producing. So the practical experiment so far has been failing on that regard. In order for the West to restart its military-industrial complex, they need to change social-economic model. Changing that might cause a whole revolution, and it likely will change the political scape. In the United States, there likely will be revolts similar to what we've seen in BLM a few years ago, when a number of people will find themselves without direct social security support. And second, if they, or when they rather, discover that their assets were overpriced and suddenly they become much poorer. Because generally speaking, American assets are all overvaluated. Because when people were talking about me buying a house for $1 million in California, you can, for $1 million, you can buy a pretty beaten up 2-bedroom thing. Similar square footage as on the outskirts of Kiev, but do you think that apartment would actually cost $1 million? Of course not. So it almost takes a whole social change and what we can call a revolution, I guess, in this case, to change all these things. But just to remind our listeners, the tempo of growth of military production in the United States is 0.65%. Their inflation is approaching 6 or 7%. That's less than that. So how do you going to win the war on the negative industrial growth? That's a very good question, which I don't have an answer for. Another question asked by viewers: Olexiy, do you see a problem with alcoholism and drug abuse in the youth in Ukraine? Well, that's a problem, and it also it exists even in the army to some degree. But basically, this is an attempt to find salvation in artificial, self-induced or chemically induced states. And this is an attempt to escape from the place or mental place where they don't see perspectives, when they don't see a future. This is the best way to treat that, is to give people future, to give people perspective. So since we are not really focused in Ukraine or on setting up a good perspective, situation likely will continue, and probably in the most part of the world as well. Olexiy, another question. Tell us more about the Texas, about the border situation there. Well, I know a little more maybe than you guys in Ukraine, but the general problem is that American federal border guards left the border with pleasure, and people close to them told me that basically when they're forced to let migrants go because of the order of the White House, they're just feeling ashamed for not fulfilling what they're there to do. So when local guards came over, said that, hey, we'll take over that, they happily let them do it. Because the policy of Biden's administration was to let everybody go. And monthly they were getting about 300,000 migrants across the border. So there's no real resistance there on the border. The ultimatum of the White House did not work. Federal border guards are not in a hurry to come back. National Guard takes over and protects the border with pleasure. while federal servicemen understand that something is wrong with these orders. So in Texas, the state basically replaced federal service on the protection of the border. Biden set the ultimatum, immediately cease and desist. Texas said, no, we won't. About 25 states supported Texas. And they started exchanging National Guard and supporting each other, whatever they need to. And each state has its own National Guard, so they have that resource. Now, National Guard is still protecting the border. Federal center is sitting thinking what to do with these governors who don't want to listen to the White House. So some sort of a prologue to the civil war, maybe de facto, soft, crypto-formed civil conflict. Definitely a civilian resistance between the federal center and the states themselves. And if one remembers that some states announced that we will not put certain candidates on the ballot, that is also another precursor to a much larger civilian conflict. Well, Olexiy, Russian media, Russian networks already painting a civil war in the United States, that the brother will be fighting brother. Well, ideologically, it exists. Ideologically, that war is going. There's definitely a conflict in the American society brewing. And if you've seen the trailer for A Civil War, the movie coming out, you've seen the trailer, right? The guy there trying to pass through and telling that, hey, it's me and my family, we're Americans. And the question he is being asked by the guard is, what kind of Americans are you? It seems like it's about the problem of identification as a nation, who they are. That's the same issue that is being sought by many other countries too, in different ways. Indonesia, very actively looking for ways to self-identify. 50 languages, very good economy, booming, but still trying to solve that. Korea got some issues, trying to figure out their future. Asia, you can see that in Asia too. Japan has a lot of questions, where are they going? In Europe, you can definitely see different flows. And us in Ukraine, we are struggling for what are we going to be? And for now, it seems like we're pushing out all the alternative ideas out of the country. And in my opinion, we're going the most uneconomical way about finding this path. And I'm all for going a different route, but perhaps we need to let them go, make a full circle to understand that they're wrong. Oh, friends, please click that like button. Only 4,000 likes when so many of you are watching. So just a reminder, please. What do you think about Boris Nadezhdin, a probable candidate for presidential elections in so-called presidential elections in Russia? I have nothing to think about him yet. I know he exists. I heard his program is based on anti-war rhetoric. And I even was sent by some of the people a clip from his speech when he said that it would be more effective to discuss that with Arestovych than with Zelensky. I'm open for a debate with him if that comes to. And YouTube allows people to meet being in different places, right? So I can even make a statement here. Dear Boris, we can record a stream with you about how do we see a way to exit out of this conflict, out of this war. Maybe do like an hour stream and let's discuss our options. Do you think, Olexiy, he can be free in expressing his opinions? Because in Russia, where they put people in jail about what they call fakes, about fake news about army. Well, Russia is a complex animal. They have different flows there. Novosibirsk, Petersburg, they are rather in opposition. All the humanitarians there are against Putin and his positions. So there's a lot of rhetoric against him. A very evil and suppressive regime that is being drawn has a lot of support by Ukrainian propaganda. We are making a lot of mistakes in this. And I can give you a simple example. In Russia, you can go in jail for a post on Facebook, and they jailed last year a bit over 400 men. In Britain, they do not necessarily put everybody in jail. They put people for social work, but 3,300 people were punished last year, when there are 3 times less population than Russia. Well, Olexiy, in the recent couple of days, there were journalists arrested in Moscow, near Kremlin, when journalists came to film the protest of the wives of mobilized. Well, yeah, true. Same thing. Actually, in the United States, they're arresting a lot of people, not jailing, but yeah, arresting for different political coverage when things get heated. In Ukraine, BBC gave some numbers that over 200 men got their jail terms, prison terms actually, for likes and reposts. There was one most glaring 74-year-old retiree got a criminal case and got an actual jail time for 3 likes in a classmates network in Russia. So it's not just all black and white. There are different shades of gray there. Okay, let's proceed. News from the front: Russian UAVs, Lancets, are a serious menace to our artillery, and now we're talking about Russia probably starting to ingest AI into their drones, and how may that affect? Also, the other question is about rotation. There are some troops that have been serving for a while and were not replaced, rotated. So, okay, drones are on the verge of the next technological jump. Indeed, when AI gets on board, it allows certain new features, because drones now have very high resolution cameras. And I'll name just one, in my opinion, very dangerous trend very soon, and there are some experimental ones that can land somewhere near the target area, just like the bird of prey, and they would be looking for a type of equipment, or for a plate on the car, or a face of a person can be a target if it matches. So that becomes sort of a personal death that follows you, right? And they can track the silhouette, they can track the insignia on the uniform. So this is almost that sci-fi story about the death hunting you personally, right? You can imagine how many criminal things will be happening after the war, how the gangs will figure it out between themselves, when the drones will be able to be programmed to attack the car with plates or the person. And one of the other features is that presence of AI demands a much lower quality of the operator, because today a pilot who is running the drone is a very well-trained professional or amateur, but who went through a rather rigorous training. But it takes a lot of training to really do that on the last of your battery, to reach the proper piece of equipment and blow it up. But for the AI, it's enough to just launch it. You can launch it with a very basic training, 2 days of training, and you can launch them en masse. And they can become more massively used and more dangerous and make decisions themselves on the battlefield. So the weapons will maybe making decisions about hitting targets, right? Plus, there is distributed approach as well being developed, when drones can work in flocks, and they have their own sectors, and they have the central communication drone that guides a smaller group. That means that the battlefield will be very different and probably very quiet, and motion of a human or an equipment on the battlefront will be almost a quest like 50-50. I will either make it to that hill or I won't. We don't even know full scale of repercussions of what will follow and the fallout. But the testing samples for all these technologies already being worked with. That's the drone stuff. The other question about rotation, yes, indeed, there is a lot of disparity between different detachments. Some of them are regularly rotating, others are fighting from the first day. And we're coming back to the first question in that stream: how effective are things in the army, in our defense forces in general? If these disconnects exist, if these differences are so glaring, who's in charge of that? Commander-in-chief or commanders below him? These are the real questions that need to be posted, and questions need to be sought for. And Mariana, she was making a lot of errors too, but she was posting these questions, indeed, and people should have been more attentive. We can set aside her personal attacks on Zaluzhny, which I cannot condone, but other questions that she brought, they're rather valid. And I think these questions should be asked by military from the front as well, and we, as the ones who affect the public opinion, should be bringing up these problems. These are real questions that the government needs to be addressing. Not the questions about how did Arestovych leave the country or what is he doing near Metropolitan Museum here in New York. I bought it, right? It's my anteroom. Nothing happens, right, if you discuss where I work or what I do here. Nothing changes with rotation in Ukraine. Your pensions are not getting better. So thankfully, the servicemen are coming to our streams and talking about that too, the officers of different ranks. But we need to keep drumming this drum. For today, indeed, we need to keep bringing it up that there is a huge discrepancy in different kinds of troops in terms of rotation, and we're paying with tens of thousands of destroyed families and lost lives for the inefficiencies of our military machine. And for today, this inefficiency is below what we need to win in this war. And daily, until this problem is solved, we're paying with lives of our friends, of our fathers, of our nephews, of our cousins, those who are fighting on the front, right? And then people try to attack me instead of bring up real questions. And some people ask, why don't you go to Congress, Olexiy? Well, I might, but, it'll be just me and Mariana bring up these questions. We need more attention on that. We need society at large concerned about it. Do you think, Olexiy, they can change some things within the army without the legalese coming from Congress? They can do some, but not much. You need really big things, big changes. And even if you replace the commander-in-chief, that can be partially as an influence to this, a solution to this problem, but it needs to be a whole concerted effort, a program of doing it. And until we make a system human-centric so that we would care about the person's destiny from the moment when he is drafted to the moment throughout the whole path, when he's trained, when he's fighting in the army, when he is discharged, when we show that we do care about the person and not about the system, that's when things will start changing. And those fake news about Arestovych, that he supposedly bought a house for $1 million, they're being pushed around in every media in Ukraine. But the other piece of news that every congressman since the beginning of war bought either a vehicle or an apartment, that didn't really get in the limelight, right? Real news. I would suggest to find which car did I buy, except for the one that I donated to the front during that time. Another question, Olexiy, do you perhaps want to comment on the law about weapons, about arms and carry of arms in Ukraine? Well, I haven't really acquainted with that law yet. I got some excerpts about it. But my position is that our citizens should be weapon-carrying citizens. When you have a weapon, you become a real citizen. You take care about that. You have a safe. You go through certain training to use it. Right. It pushes a citizen to be a better citizen, to have more awareness about social issues, about his responsibilities. And it also pushes our government to be more delicate, because his citizens are capable of protecting their own ideals. And we'll be facing that soon anyway. There's already a lot of arms in our society. And frankly, in the next round of technological development, when there'll be drones targeting people, how much can you defend yourself with a pistol, right? It's not really that much of a weapon. Another aspect, a curious one from the United States, the states where they have a carry, a concealed carry, an open carry, those states have much less cases of illegal weapon use. Those states where everything is prohibited, that's where the criminals know that they're safe, because they know that nobody will be concealed carrying a weapon. Like in somewhere in Texas, where if you pull the gun in the wrong place, you'll probably be shot before police gets there. And, they differ here. Some states really restrict everything, like New York and California. Other states actually require that citizens should have some means of protection. And it's almost to the level of penalizing when you don't. Really? That's how it works there? I'll need to research that matter. Okay. Let's proceed with more questions from viewers. Do you think there's another Korean War possible? It is possible. By the way, they're expecting a visit of Putin to North Korea. South Korea is one of the main donors of artillery shells and military equipment to Ukraine, and Putin might ask North Korea for a small conflict. I don't see it turning into a big war, but it might be enough to create political pressure on the conservative or self-defense circles in South Korea to stifle the amount of weaponry being sent to Ukraine under the guise of, hey, why are we sending it when we need it here? So there might be a heightening of tensions, and it actually somewhat is happening now because North Korea recently shelled some island, right, that belongs to South Korea. So, Olexiy, what do you think about another front in Latvia or hybrid war in Europe? I think that the Baltic countries are definitely, and yeah, we call them near Baltic and Russian, but yeah, Baltic. I think them and Poland are indeed under real threat. And I think it's inevitable that this threat will materialize in some sort of military threat in the next year or two, unfortunately. To their honor, they understand that. The politicians have some issues, but military definitely, the military specialists, defense ministers definitely agree on that. And they're consulting with other NATO countries on this. And the main question here would be, yeah, sure, they can cause serious losses to Russian forces if they invade, but the next question would be, how do you push them out after they occupy some part of the territory? Olexiy, according to your prognosis, what will be happening in about 6 months from now? Well, does the listener imply in Ukraine? No, no clarification, but let's say Ukraine. Okay, the most probable scenario is continuing fallout from bad decisions in the political leadership, more crumbling of the social systems, and growing problems in the military. We will not have enough money for mobilizations, so that will cause more issues on the front, and we'll have to react to Russian mobilization on the other hand. And after Putin is reappointed the president of Russia, we may have more problems on the front because he might likely throw more people. By summer, we'll have more problems materializing with equipment, with artillery, if America will not restart support of Ukraine. And it'll be a difficult year. Well, Russian offensive is happening now, right? Yeah, no, but what I mean is that after Putin's reappointment, they will likely do another wave of mobilization. They may get more resources and create another threat to Kharkov and Kiev. I'm not quite believing in that, but our generals are warning about it too. They likely will try, because their main ideation is to push us. They're not hoping to win over Ukraine militarily anymore, but they want to push us and to the negotiations from their position of strength when they are in the active phase of attack, when the election campaign in the United States is ongoing. So they would be hoping to affect everything in Ukraine. And they do hope that Trump as a president might bring relief to their situation with Ukraine. And their task is to impress on the West that it's useless to support Ukraine, and I'm using Russian rhetoric here, that Ukraine will fall anyway or will steal all the support. It's not me saying, again, it's Russian propaganda says it like this. And they're insisting that this war is useless at large, so don't fight it against us. And they will try to affix those 4 occupied territories that they got on these negotiations to legalize that with Ukraine representatives. And also the other question behind that is to disappoint the West in the perspective of letting Ukraine join NATO. And to make it easier for the West to process their offers, they might start a few more fires between 2 Koreas, perhaps on the Baltic countries' borders, and there may be other spots in the world where they can reignite that. And that's the same strategy that General Soleimani was talking about before America took him out. He was insisting that they need to set more fires ablaze in the world so America would drown trying to take them out. Olexiy, another question. We have issues now with acquiring a foreign travel passport in Ukraine. If I'm not in Ukraine, what is the best route? Well, my personal advice, if your strategy is not to return to Ukraine, you should probably naturalize in the country where you reside. And as far as Ukraine is concerned, that's once again highlights the problem that our government is not really creating conditions for people to support Ukraine, to stay with Ukraine. They're essentially blackmailing them. If you want a travel passport, you need to be on the list of possibly candidates to be mobilized. I think that our politicians should be apologizing in front of our citizens for these harsh conditions and all these things that they endure and that they had to flee the areas of war. And instead, we are attacking them. We're trying to take the last from them and to cause different bureaucratic issues or threaten them with different levers. I think it's a wrong politics, but unfortunately, that's the one that Kiev has chosen so far. And that's why my prognosis for 6 months from now is that things will be worse, not better than now. The politics of pushing people out does not lead to anything good in the country. There were some questions about Ukrainians abroad. Right, well, they were making different statements. President was saying one thing about those people who emigrated or ran as refugees. There was his wife also voicing that it's not right to push people outside the country. And I generally side with her opinion that you should not be pushing them out in that difficult situation, or at least not to cause additional animosity with those who had to leave the country. And unfortunately, our politics is taking these citizens, if not as direct enemy, but not as friends who are not helping the country. And that's once again why I want them to play this game for the full circle, so every Ukrainian can understand and come to the conclusion that this strategy and this politics leads to the crash of their own lifestyle, the crash of the government, and we cannot be going in that direction. In order to change that process that we've been walking on that path for 32 years, and that some people are still supporting actively, despite all these discombobulations in the political scene, I think they need to feel the fruit of this path. And the best thing we can do here is to try to help them that this is a wrong strategy, that this policy is ineffective, it is harmful. For now, they're all convinced that it's different. It's not so. I'm being largely attacked in Ukrainian social media for my views. They think that's how it should be done, and this is for the better. You don't know anything, Olexiy. Let's just push our citizens outside the country and cause more damage to them. I'll just let them do it. Let's let them see the wrong of their ways. What should people do in Russia, those who are against Putin and against war? Well, there are three ways of jihad, right, if we use that rhetoric. The first one is to fight. The second one is to help those fighting. The third is internally to disagree. That's also a jihad, right? So if you do not allow those Putin's propaganda machines to spike your life, that's resistance. That's already a resistance, right? You can see Nadezhdin, for example. You can support him. He's a citizen who came out and risking his life to support anti-war movement. We'll see if he turns out to be a real figure or some another FSB ploy. But if that happens, then just remember that it was your decision, not Arestovych pushed you to make this decision. But you can make a decision whether to support him or not, and whether to support people opposing Putin. Another viewer is writing that one of the most difficult tasks is to invoke thinking and also train critical thinking with people. What do you see in terms of our future in the next 2 to 3 years from where you are, Olexiy? As Yuriy Romanenko is saying, I'm seeing a catastrophe of the Third Ukrainian Republic. We need to understand that our practices were immoral and ineffective, because you cannot make hatred as a public technology. God doesn't like hatred. When where there is hatred, there is no God, with all the things concluding. And the rest is mathematics. If our military-industrial complex works like that, that just tells you that we will not be able to have enough resources and enough people supporting it. And we will not be having that until the government decides to make our politics human-centric. And we'll be losing territories and people until we come to our senses. And so far, everything goes in the wrong direction. So yeah, that's why the trajectory is for losing so far. Until we understand that our politics and the principle is wrong, we need to change it. And we will be paying full price. We have paid already and we'll be paying more. And an abstract question from the viewer: what should we expect from China? Well, Minister of Defense of China said, the new one, said that he is supporting Russia fully, and China is more and more switching from being neutral to a position of the leader of the global south, or one of the leaders of the global south. It is very growing, very anti-West moods there, and we understand that North Korea could not have donated their weapons without Chinese support, and I suspect that China will be getting involved in this conflict one way or another. On the formal way, they are supporting Ukrainian sovereignty and territory, but we already have added Chinese factories to the list of the sanctioned companies, Chinese production companies, sorry. And likely that situation might deteriorate between us. I think our relations with China will continue deteriorating because the war needs to be viewed, in my opinion, as the global war of the West against global South. China considers us to be not important satellite. They prefer even not to talk to us. Chinese diplomacy is not aimed at discussing things with satellite countries. They rather talk with the master countries, so with the real players. And unfortunately, we are not there yet. We do not have enough material backbone to support our policy being fully independent. So in the logic of conflict of global South versus the global West, our relations with China will deteriorate. What about the fundraisers? Well, we are gathering money for the first tank brigade. Fun note that its commander keeps saying that Arestovych is an asshole, but we're gathering money not for him, but for the detachment. In a way, for him too, because regardless of what he says, we need his brigade to fight effectively. So despite his certain degree of animosity towards me personally, we're still doing the fundraiser for the brigade. And we're gathering money for UAVs. It's 310,000. We already raised 256 of that. Not a big effort, guys. We usually close it in a couple dozens of minutes, so we'll probably replace that fundraiser under that video once that is closed. So let's please finish the collection for the first tank brigade. That one will be under Alexei's video. Under mine, we'll be gathering more money for Mavics for 72nd. Right, you're very persistent, Vasil. You continue supporting 72nd Brigade. Good for you. Right, friends, if you can, please support our armed forces. Alexei, thank you so much. Thank you a lot for coming on air. Very informative, very interesting. See you in about a week. See you.